Ian Rigby asks, you have talked about dumpster diving as a freelancer because you couldn't necessarily afford exotic materials like wrench shape. Was there ever a time you found something and were like, oh my God, this is the mother lode? Yes, I've had a lot of really, really great mother lode dumpster dives. So, the greatest dumpster diving city in the world is New York City. Without a doubt, what people throw out in New York City would fit in anybody else's apartment. And San Francisco's not a great dumpster diving city. But back when I was doing a lot of dumpster diving, the early 90s, I would go to industrial parks. Industrial parks are a reasonable place to go dumpster diving. And I did learn from some cops that pulled me over at 3 in the morning. What are you doing here at an industrial park at 3 in the morning? He said. We've got nothing else to do but deal with this. Someone calls and says someone's rifling through a dumpster. I'm going to drive down here. He said, go do this in San Francisco. They're all way too busy to mess around with you. There's that. I discovered that the best time to go through industrial parks for materials is Sunday afternoons. And there was a whole group of us dumpster diving. So when I first moved to San Francisco, I worked for Amorphic Robot Works, Chico McMurtry's machine art. I won't say it's a collective because it's Chico, but it was a collective in that there was a whole bunch of us that worked supporting Chico. And many of our team also did the same work for Survival Research Labs. Now, if you don't know about Survival Research Labs, you should, because, I mean, I feel like you wouldn't have Burning Man without Survival Research Labs. I feel like one begets the other. They both came about at a similar time in San Francisco's history in the 80s. And I can't tell you which one came first. I think SRL is a little older. But SRL brought this kind of irreverent, fire-breathing party atmosphere to their oeuvre in the 15, 20 years they were here in San Francisco plying their trade. And their trade was to put on shows illegally once every year or two. And after every show Survival Research Labs did, either Mark Pauline, who ran it, or Mike Dingle, his production manager, one of the two of them would spend the night in jail. I'm not kidding. These guys were deep committed. And SRL and Amorphic Robot Works, me, Barry Schwartz, the animal. Barry was another machine artist at the time, did a lot of televisions in mineral oil. All of us would be dumpster diving through industrial parks in the middle of the night, and occasionally we'd run into each other. But at one point, I am at a dumpster and I find a bunch of plywood that feels like it shouldn't necessarily be in the dumpster, but there's a free sign next to it. So I'm like, sure. So I start loading the plywood. And then I come back home and I tell Barry about the free sign. And Barry goes, you found my free sign. It turns out Barry would drive around the Bay Area with a free sign in his back. He didn't care about the time of day. And when he saw a pile of something that he liked, he would jump out of the pickup truck, throw the free sign on it, and then immediately start loading it into his truck. And if the cops came up, he'd be like, there's a sign that says free. There is also, for excellent dumpster diving, almost every municipality has a trash day, once or twice a year, or at more frequency than that, where everyone can put all their big ticket crap out on the street and the garbage companies will take it away. Trash day is a great day. I found power tools in dumpsters on trash day. Seriously, I once found a Makita drill that had been thrown out. And when I pulled it out of the trash, the only issue with it was that the forward reverse button was stuck in the middle. And they threw the whole thing out with the charger and everything, and I got a brand new Makita drill for moving that switch. Yeah, trash day is, in fact, in the early 90s, trash day was not something that Sunset Scavenger would publish citywide. They'd tell each neighborhood when its trash day was, but the trash day collector people like me and my friends would have to trade. Oh, it's Bernal Hill this weekend. Oh, it's the Richmond this weekend. And then we'd go out there and collect. Yeah. I think the best thing I ever found were my airplane food carts. I don't have one visible to you here right now. They're on big rollers there, but these are the ones the little liquor bottles come in, right? These are the 4-drawer, aluminum drawer liquor bottle dispensers on an airplane. And back when I was setting up my first loan shop on Yosemite Street up in Hunters Point, Barry took me to this abandoned parking lot, in the corner of which was several hundred airplane food containers. They were not behind a locked gate, and Barry and I threw a dozen of them into my car. I still think that we were playing a little fast and loose, but it was over 30 years ago, and I feel okay and sanguine about it now. But yeah, that was without a doubt the greatest score. Airplane food containers sitting in an open parking lot, that was pretty cool. Yeah, I'm not proud of that. I don't think that those were meant for the general public. But you know, we were all young and stupid once. Finchpin has a 3D printer, but their failure rate is about 60%. It is demotivating. Yes. And you don't know what you're doing wrong. Yes. He has a Creality resin printer, which when it works is fantastic. Any tips? Okay, I don't have specific tips for resin printers or Creality printers specifically. I will say that I too, for all the singing and dancing I've been doing about bamboo Carbon X1 printers and my printing farm here at the cave, my first few prints were probably over a 50% failure rate. And it was just based on small bits of institutional knowledge I did not have yet. And it's all about this relationship between the part, its volume, the printer, and the best way to set that part up for printing success. There's not a crazy amount to learn to get this right, but it's really specific. I think, in my impression, it's specific printer to printer. So my advice, my tips for your 3D printer is, I get that it's demotivating. You've got to get obsessed and push past that demotivation. Just keep printing something until you can. You know what? I'll give you this one. If you're having trouble getting a success, but you've just gotten a failure, try to get the failure again. This is a process that's actually can be just as useful as failing and then succeeding. Because if you can replicate the failure, then you've understood its cause. And once you've understood its cause, you've internalized something important about the process. So just trying to replicate your failures between one part and the next could be a really interesting thing to do. But my tip is there's some dues paying between you and the machine. And this exists with 3D printers more than most tools because 3D printers have a long delay from go to I'm done. And there's a lot of room in there for all sorts of interpretation and all sorts of things to happen. And there are also ways in which to expect those mistakes and prepare for them. And that's institutional knowledge. So obsession is the best way to get that institutional knowledge. And actually, I realized this advice isn't mine. It comes from an old girlfriend of mine. So I was living in New York in the 80s, and I was a sculptor. I was making lots of sculpture. I wanted attention for my sculptures. I was an art. I thought of myself as an artist. I am an artist. And I said to her, she and my girlfriend at the time worked at a major gallery in New York City. And I don't mean a major gallery like you'd know their name, but major in that all the artists they carried made their living from making their art. That's tricky business right there. And I said, is there something that unifies all the artists you work with? Is there some quality they all have that I could learn from? I said this to her, I was like 21. And she said, oh man, they're all so radically different. But she thought about it and came back and said, there is a thing that unifies them, and they're all obsessed with the business and the practice of what they're doing. They know everyone who's coming through town. They know all the shows. They know all the pieces, the fabricators, the art. They know all of the aspects of the business because they're obsessed with it. And I think that's a great piece of advice. It really helped frame it for me about what I was and wasn't willing to become obsessed with. I mean, Yeah. Fidge pin, I hope that was useful. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.